Hi, and welcome to Ed Talks. My name is Oluwagbomi Adetunji Awoshoga. I am a Board of Governors Teaching Chair here at the University of Lethbridge. I will start by giving the territorial acknowledgement. Okay, the University of Lethbridge Blackfoot's name is Erinskrim, meaning Sacred Buffalo Stone. The university is located in traditional Blackfoot Confederacy territory. We honor the Blackfoot people and their traditional ways of knowing in caring for this land, as well as all Aboriginal people who have helped shape and continue to strengthen our university community. It is my great pleasure and honor to be here with our guest today, Dr. Deanna Oye of the Department of Music. She's an associate professor in the Faculty of Arts at the University of Lethbridge. You are welcome.
Thank you very much.
Please, to start the conversation, can you give us a brief background of how you come into teaching and why you decided to come to the University of Lethbridge?
Absolutely. Well, I was really fortunate in my upbringing to be able to teach at a very early age and to be mentored in teaching at a very early age. I grew up in Ontario, Thunder Bay, Ontario, which is the northwestern part of the province. And there was a wonderful community music school there where I grew up basically from the age of 6 and continued teaching there up until somewhere in my mid-20s while I was a university student. But I actually was able to start teaching there as a student teacher at the age of 15, and with mentoring and pedagogy classes, and wonderful teachers who were supports for all of the student teachers, and so we had a wonderful environment in which to be able to grow, to make some mistakes, to experience the one-on-one teaching that is a lot of the part of the major part of piano teaching.
Oh.
So this was really wonderful. So I think from a very early age, it wasn't necessarily that I knew that I was going to be a teacher in a university setting or in any setting necessarily, but I grew accustomed to the idea of being with students, of communicating with others, with sharing music in ways other than performing. And so it kind of seemed natural to me once I finished my doctorate that I might pursue a position at a university in a teaching capacity. Scroll forward to a number of years to when I was finishing off my doctorate. I was at the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York, and just finishing off the doctorate and looking actively for positions and hoping to be back in Canada, of course. And I heard about a position which was at that time a kind of unusual position in that it was a split position between the Conservatory of Music and the Department of Music here at the U of L. And it was at that point a 3-year term. And I said, well, I'll try and see if I might be able to, if that might be a good fit, and if I might be able to start my teaching career there. And it was a primarily teaching position. And so I came here to the U of L. I was successful with that in winning the position. And I was teaching piano and theory for the Conservatory of Music and teaching classroom musicianship skills for the Department of Music and working with colleagues in a performing capacity here. And fortunately for me, that short-term position evolved, or rather a position became available soon after, about a year later. That was tenure track, and I applied and competed for that position, and here I am so many years later.
Our journey is very similar.
Are they?
I came here as an academic assistant 3, just to teach.
Yes.
That's all. But the position opened in 2012, and it's a neutral position, and I was lucky to get it. So it's very similar to my experience.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah.
Yes. Can you please share with us the philosophy that has guided your teaching?
If I can explain it in as succinctly as possible, I would say that it's really important to me to be able to facilitate and empower individual learning, to be able to help a student to, and especially in music, it's so important to be able to find your own voice, to be able to enable them to explore, to have a healthy environment in which to engage in that exploration, and at the same time to foster a sense of community, which is, I think, also so very important as a musician, as a human being overall, to be able to take that your individual voice and bring it into a community setting in which you are sharing your experiences, sharing your knowledge, and sharing your art. That, for me, is the environment that I try to create in my teaching, and that I think I'm mostly successful with in helping my students to be able to create for other generations of students and their students to come later on once they leave this institution.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's good to hear. I've been hearing a lot about developing a studio family. Can you shed more light on this?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the community part of what I was just talking about, studio family, for me, is the idea that students, when they join the U of L piano studio, are not alone, and that they have mentors, that they have senior students who can help them to integrate into studio. It can be a really daunting thing to start university, of course, and an even more daunting situation to start performing in front of other students, in front of your peers and your professors, to jump into all of the ins and outs of what is piano studio or applied studies in piano here at the U of L. And so from the very get-go, I try to ask my senior students to mentor the incoming first-year students, and I have borrowed a project that one of my wonderful colleagues, Blaine Hensby, developed in his studio, in his voice studio, called Practice Partners, and I modified it and kind of made it also applicable to the situation of my students and my studio. I pair the students up at the beginning of each semester, one senior student, third or fourth year student, with one second or first year student, and their job is not necessarily, the job of the senior student is not necessarily to teach the junior students, although maybe sometimes that happens, but they get together on a weekly basis, at least for about a half an hour. And they share some of their experience. Sometimes it's just talking, and sometimes it is they play for each other. They are about to have a performance in masterclass, and so they want to have a chance to play for somebody else, a kind of friendly audience or a smaller friendly audience at that at a critical juncture, or they have questions about a technique, or questions about how to do some fingering, or something specific, and so they can get together with each other and talk about those things. And sometimes the junior students don't necessarily realize how helpful that they are to the senior
Seniors.
students on a number of levels. Sometimes it's confidence building. Sometimes it's the ability to explain. The senior students are developing the ability to explain something that they've only done in the past, right? And so they have to be able to think about their technique. They have to be able to think about musical concepts and interpretation on in a verbal way. They have to be able to say what they mean and explain it to somebody else, communicate it to somebody else. And I think that that's a really critical skill that they develop through being a practice partner. And if we didn't have the practice partnerships, some of this would already happen. But in some cases, some students would sort of slip through the cracks or not feel, they might feel self-conscious or nervous about approaching somebody to ask questions. So by having this as part of the studio routine, official studio routine, it makes it something that they feel, I think, a little bit more comfortable in doing. And as students become more senior as they go on through their semesters, they take on a leadership role that they've seen other students before them take on. So that means in master class that they are perhaps leading more of the conversation. They feel comfortable in sharing their thoughts about somebody else's performance. They feel like they can actively seek out one of the perhaps less experienced pianists and ask them if they need assistance with something. And that's what I mean by studio family. Not to mention, in non-pandemic times, we get together at least a couple of times per semester and do something non-musical as a studio, and that also reinforces that sense of family. Also, we've done a couple of U of L piano tours of smaller communities in Alberta, and students have been out there talking about the program. They've been out there sharing their thoughts on teaching, and they've been giving performances, and they've been co-teaching master classes with community students in various cities and towns across Alberta with me. So through that system, they have been also starting to, I guess, move and put one foot forward into the professional world. And it's just like any other family where, you know, a young child grows up into a teenager, and the teenager starts doing normal teenage things, and then they go to university and they step one foot out into the real world, so to speak. So do the students in the university studio, in the piano studio. They're one foot at a time, setting foot in to a more professional world. So by having a mentored experience.
Yeah, it's even good or better to know that you try to build a kind of social relationship between the cohort and between the professor and the students. Even that build more trust, and they'll be able to come forward.
Absolutely. Especially in the solo piano world, solo piano is something that you do by yourself. And you go in a practice room and you can spend hours by yourself.
Wow.
You know, in a lot of other schools that I've been, that I'm familiar with, solo pianists do kind of tend to be the loners. And I think that it's important that pianists, that anyone, but pianists in particular, because of the solo nature, need to build their social skills as well, need to feel a part of a community outside when they open their practice room door. And they see others out there that they can partake of that community.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, since you mentioned that of piano, I'm looking in terms of collaborative piano and guitar. How do you encourage them to develop skills and ideas beyond the discipline?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I should probably explain first that collaborative piano and collaborative piano and guitar is a course that I teach and that I developed here when I first came to the U of L.
Wow.
And that I was fortunate enough when I came as a junior professor here to be able to imagine what a collaborative series could be like here, and to be able to invent the course, to grow the course, and to kind of shepherd it along through the years. The idea of collaborative piano is one that is a relatively new one in the post-secondary scene. One of my teachers and mentors at Eastman, Dr. Jean Barr, was a pioneer in bringing collaborative piano graduate level courses, master's and doctoral level courses, to universities in the U.S. And she remains one of the leaders in the field. So when I came here, one of the things that I found that was missing from the training of the pianists and also of the guitarists was ensemble experience that was specific to their area. Band students or winds and brass and percussion could participate in the wind orchestra or the jazz ensemble. Singers participated in the choir, the U of L singers, or in opera workshop. The pianists and guitarists were expected to have an ensemble experience, but it would have to be as a member of the choir, singing in the choir, or maybe possibly playing the piano or one of their other, if they had another instrument in the wind orchestra. But even if they had the opportunity to play the piano in one of those ensembles, it would only really capture one individual at a time. And so I felt that it was necessary for the pianists to have a course, an ensemble experience that was specific to their own instrument. And at the same time, I thought, well, I'm sure that the guitarists would also benefit from the same. And so the ensemble situation that both pianists and guitarists usually find themselves in is in small duos and trios, sometimes small chamber ensembles of a slightly bigger nature. But I chose to kind of focus on the duos and trios. They would be able to learn the skills that are important to working with another musician, be it a singer or a wind player, a brass player, a percussionist. So they start off by learning something about working with languages and text. And so I give them a bit of an overview of how to work with lyric diction, which is how to pronounce in various languages, the main singing languages, first English, French, German, Italian, and some Spanish. How to work with those languages, even if you're not a native speaker, or even if you really haven't had a chance to take a language course of any of those languages, to work with the International Phonetic Alphabet, to kind of to work with poetry in general, to find good translations. And it's not that they're going to become expert in functioning as a vocal coach at that point, but they have a little bit of an insight as to how to work with singers. And likewise, they take that textual idea, the idea of working with text, and bring that to the instrumental ensemble field, where they have, because they've been listening so acutely to how does one consonant sound, how long does a consonant a consonant cluster, how long can it last? Are these voiced consonants? Are they unvoiced consonants? Are they open vowels? Are they closed vowels? Because they've been listening that way in their work with singers, then they can start thinking also about in their instrumental work, in their collaboration as with an instrumentalist, what exactly is that what is that sound akin to? The clarinet's tonguing, does that sound like a t? Does it sound like a b? Does it sound like a s? And how do we then, as a pianist or a guitarist, match that sound? How do we change the speed of attack? How do we change the length of the vowel? So to speak, even if there is no vowel and no text in the instrumental world. And then they can bring this back to their solo material as well. But even more importantly, at the end of the day, I think, what the students in the collaborative piano and guitar series start to learn is how to communicate with their partners, how to plan together a rehearsal, how to make choices together when you might have differing opinions about what you should be doing.
Yes.
How to deal with somebody who is consistently late, or how to deal with a situation when, there might be a conflict of personality without causing a disruption in the partnership.
Yeah.
And so it's a skill that I think that all of us as human beings need to build and work on constantly ourselves. And I think that through collaborative music making, the students are developing these communication skills that can take them further, no matter what kind of situation they find themselves in on a day-to-day basis in their future. Because who knows, students can end up doing anything down the road, and those skills can be very, very critical.
Useful. Yeah, I know, because we are not just teaching them how to cope on campus, but outside there.
Yes.
How do you adjust to the system?
Yes.
What you have learned, how are you able to transfer it, translate it into reality when you are faced with making decisions in such situation? So building that cohort will help them a lot, I know.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking outside of your own discipline is so important as well. As musicians, we can get very tunnel visioned in what's my technique? How am I doing this? What I have to practice? And which is all true. But at the end of the day, when you leave this institution, I want my students to be able to function well as contributing human beings to the community, whether that's through music or not through music, or in multiple ways.
Yeah, that's good. I'm always perplexed whenever I've been able to watch several presentations. Sometimes I say, well, how do they practice to get all the tune perfectly presented to the public, the community? I've been to downtown, those churches where you play, you don't know, but I've watched you and your students presenting. And a lot of other professors. It's unimaginable that they put in so much time, they are so dedicated, passionate about what they do, the way they conduct, the way they direct all those students.
Yeah.
I'm always,
Yeah.
I said, wow, I wish I would get that such a gift.
Well, it's you could. But the passion is really important too.
Yeah.
Right? If you do without that, it's a lot of work and a lot of just a lot of dedication, a lot of time, and so you have to have the passion to take you along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I know you are involved in both undergraduate and graduate teaching. How do you manage your expectation? How do you cope with all this engagement here and there? Because I know you're also committed to conservatory music and all this. So how do you manage these things? Dealing with undergraduate, graduate level, you supervise students, you mentor this, you supervise groups.
Yeah, well, I mean, it can be tricky. Balance is always tricky, of course, but I think the main thing is that I really enjoy the individuals with whom I work, the students as individuals. We come back to that. As a supervisor of a graduate student or graduate students, it's often the students are working in the studio, and so I'm giving those students opportunities to do some teaching and mentoring of the undergraduate students as well. And so my graduate student is working with me, with one student who was working with the collaborative class and who was also working with the choir, so with Dr. Janet Youngdahl, and growing experience through those ways. I find that there are some really interesting synergies sometimes. I have a student through the U of L Conservatory, and the conservatory, as you know, are community students, so they're not taking courses for credit, and there are students of varying ages and levels of experience. Most of the students I currently have are kind of in the high school and or current university students, but non-majors in that age group, and a few out of university altogether, and community students. But one of the interesting things I encountered recently is a student who started with me several years ago through the conservatory as a relatively advanced pianist at that point. And he was also a kinesiology major here.
Wow.
And what was interesting to me was that he was fascinated with the physical aspects of playing the piano that I was introducing to him. So the idea of gesture, the idea of being as efficient in movement as possible, the idea of having the musical goal reflect, or the musical goal actually then lead us to the physical means. And he was fascinated by this. And at that point, he was in his last year of his undergraduate and decided that he would like to pursue this further, the combination of kinesiology with piano technique.
Wow.
And so he's now pursuing a master's in kinesiology, but in the world of piano technique, and doing all sorts of motion capture research and everything that is at the forefront right now there is no research of that type outside of what he is doing of that particular kind, where he's using real musical examples as opposed to kind of non-musical but kind of repetitive movement measurements, I guess. I don't know how to explain that any better unless I actually have a piano in front of me. But anyway, we've been having conversations weekly conversations at his piano lesson about where he's at in his research, and then we've been talking about ways of explaining things, using what kind of words actually not only make sense from the scientific perspective, but also make sense from the piano teacher in the community perspective, because there's often that bridge that isn't crossed between the practitioners and the teachers in the wider community and the scientific research. And so we've been talking a lot about that, and it's been really fascinating to see where his research has been taking him, and I'm really looking forward to following him past this degree.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that's good. I know. One student actually from music and kinesiology took my advanced statistics, and he said he wants to learn how to do quantitative analysis with the sound and all those information he's collecting. I was surprised. He performed excellently well in statistics.
Oh, okay.
Because I said, wow, you are very smart. He said, well, I'm interested in using it, so I need to learn it.
Yeah.
So I can understand when kinesiology combined with piano, and he's always coming to the class with his guitar. I said, well, you must love music. He said, yeah, Olu, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. And now, to continue the conversation, I would like to know what it entails to prepare musicians as academics, elite athletes, and as future musicians as well.
Well, I just finished talking about the combination that my conservatory student had brought together of kinesiology and piano performance, and so I'll kind of springboard from that to that I talk a lot with my students about healthy playing, healthy performance. And of course, there are physical aspects of that, and there are psychological aspects to that. So just talking about the physical side of things first, I do tell my students at the outset of their degrees that they are here to train as elite athletes. Good. Or like an elite athlete. And sometimes I have made them do push-ups, but that's another story. But the idea is not is kind of a unique one to students coming into the degree, because, or at least one that they haven't necessarily encountered before, because a lot of their conception, or a lot of the general conception of how you play the piano is with your fingers. Whereas that really is only one part of the whole combination of body movement and sound result. So I start off by telling them that they need their vision of what they want out of, let's say, out of a phrase. They need to know how, with all of their acquired and acquiring knowledge of theory, and music history, stylistic aspects and things like that, from all of that they've taken in their classroom courses, that they have that information to be able to make decisions about how a phrase should sound or how they want it to sound. And from that, they can then make decisions about how to physically achieve that sound. And of course, this is not something that comes overnight, and this is something I'm talking about over their whole 4-year degree, or however long I have them for. So I'm talking to them about being active from being active not just at the finger level, so that they are, one, not as prone to potential injury, repetitive strain injury, which is common in a university setting for pianists, and certain instruments in particular are more prone to injury than others. And pianists, because they typically spend a lot of time in the practice room and sometimes without break. And as we all know, that's doing anything repetitively without break is not a good thing. So we first have to start about how to manage your practice time, and when to take short breaks, to walk around, to do some sort of warm up and stretching before. But even before that, I like to tell the students that warming up doesn't necessarily just mean warming up the body. That a true warm-up is one that connects the body and the mind, so that they are present in their practice and not thinking about the class or the tests that they have right after, or so that they're not just, I have to get through this as fast as I can because I only have this much time, which is, I mean, it's an understandable mindset when you're a really busy undergraduate student. But we talk a lot about this in our studio class, that 20 minutes of focus on one thing, a 5-minute break.
Good.
20 minutes of something targeted and a 5-minute break, and so on and so forth. And practice periods across the day rather than a 4-hour period all at once. And, of course, student schedules don't always make it easy for that to happen. But usually they can sit down and carve out their time so that at least they minimize the risks of injury, and they minimize the time that they spend actually not achieving anything because they're not there at the time. So breathing, focusing on breathing while they warm up on something is something that I encourage, whether that's in some specific exercises that I give them, or scales, chords, and arpeggios, or something like that, but that they're breathing and that they're noticing how they warm up. That's a really critical thing. And then, of course, stretching and moving across the day, so that they're, just like we shouldn't be sitting in front of our computers without moving for periods of time. Similarly, they shouldn't be sitting in front of the piano and playing for that period of time. So that's the preparation for activity side of things. And then I have them also really thinking about, if they are moving to the right side of the piano, what are they engaging? In fact, they need to be engaging their feet. They're balancing. They are probably in some way tilting and adjusting their torso so that they're not diagonal to one side of the other. If they're moving in or out, that is engaging again the feet, the torso, the core. That if they are rounded in the shoulders, they're limiting their movement, and so on and so forth. And so we talk a lot about that. I have my students kind of watching each other, so that they are more able to see it in someone else, and the more they are able to see it in someone else, the more they are able to apply it to themselves after. Then the specific artistry. If we want that sound to sound like this, then we have to also move like this, and you have to want it enough to make your choice to do it a certain way. Otherwise, you can't just learn the notes and the rhythms and then figure it out afterward, because you're doing twice the work and having to relearn what you just did badly. So artistry always meets with the athletic side of things, and with all of the intellectual pursuits that they are going after in their academic classes, the theory, the history, music history, and the non-music courses that they are taking. Absolutely, really important. They need to be bringing all of that back. And it takes a lot of reminding because, when you get, you have an assignment to learn this piece, you kind of want to just learn the piece. But there's all this front-end thinking and decision-making, experimenting that they need to be involved in order to have the best result later on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fascinating. Yeah, I know you are involved in a lot of community performance and teaching, even with the UFL Conservatory of Music.
Yeah.
Can you enlighten us more about your involvement in these activities?
Absolutely. Well, I as we were discussing before, I do teach with the UofL Conservatory of Music, which is primarily community members or community students. But music is a community act. And it's impossible to be a musician, a performing musician, I think, without being involved with the community. And so my research, which is primarily, not exclusively, but primarily in performance, whether that is solo performance or collaborative performance, is taking me out into the community, whether it's here in Lethbridge or in Alberta, in Canada, or outside of Canada. But my students as well, they are both from communities where they are often performing when they go home in the summer or at Christmas time, or they are on tour with, as with the U of L piano tour that I was talking about before, where we went to communities and taking their performances out to students who are maybe prospective U of L students someday and their teachers. And I think that's a really important thing from the beginning, that my students here are comfortable with not just performing, but also telling their audiences something about what they are playing, why they have chosen a specific piece, what it is that makes them passionate about music or performance, and that's something I think is really important. Audiences really want to be a part of the experience. And I think that speaking to your audience, which doesn't come naturally to everyone, is as important as performing for your audience. It's I think something that audiences have become kind of, they really want that connection.
Yeah. In the course of this conversation, you briefly mentioned something about your research. Can you elaborate more on how your research has informed your teaching and learning at the University of Lethbridge?
Yeah, for sure. Piano Studio, which is what one of the courses that I teach all the time, which is the one-on-one piano teaching, applied piano, which also includes our master classes in group. That's one of the courses I teach, and that is solo piano primarily. Whereas I also teach the collaborative piano and guitar series, and sometimes I am also teaching a seminar, a music history seminar, or musicianship skills. The most recent music history seminar that I taught was a course on music by women composers. It was actually called Composers Who Happen to Be Women. All of everything, all that I do is is modeling for my students in what I do in my research, which is about half and half solo performance and collaborative performance. So I have colleagues both here and outside of the university that I work with on a fairly regular basis, and then some people that I work with on a kind of one-off basis. But those are my collaborative partners. But I also think that it's really important to be able to, I wouldn't choose one or the other, because for my students, it's important that they see me doing both.
Yeah.
And it's important that they see me doing research and teaching in areas outside of just the piano world. So the Women Composers course, for instance, was allowing me to bring them into musics that are less known or have been historically less known, and to delve into the reasons why, and past history, present day ways of teaching that have both made it difficult but also possible for women composers to flourish. Yeah. I couldn't see my teaching being separate from my performance or from my research at all. Yeah. And I couldn't imagine doing research without the teaching, because I learn. Maybe this sounds very like something that is expressed by a lot of teachers, but my performance, everything that I can perform the same piece a decade later, and it will be different than it was. And it's for a lot of reasons, life reasons, but also because I have been teaching and thinking critically about how to do things, whether it's technical or interpretive. And so my work will have grown in that intervening period because of my teaching. And so they're inextricable.
Yeah, that will bring me to another level. As your level of confidence improve over the years in teaching and learning?
Oh, without question, without question. I am much more comfortable now with doing something or saying something a little over the top that might make me look silly. I am perfectly fine with that. You know, my students at first, they might be a little shocked, or a little bit, you know, what's going on with what's this lady doing? But at the end of the day, they see the method behind the madness,
and
I think so. I think they do appreciate it after a certain amount of time, after strangely looking at me for a while, and a few strange comments in my course evaluations. but they do appreciate it, and they realize that there's sometimes I feel like I have to just take that little extra step beyond the explanation and show them something, involve them in something, and embarrass myself a little bit, and they will never forget it.
Yeah, that's good. Nice to know. Yeah. Recently, in March, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the University of Lethbridge decided to move away from face-to-face to virtual online mode of delivery. Mm-hmm. How has this affected your teaching and learning?
Well, very tricky, especially in the spring when when everything was thrown into just mayhem, and nobody knew how to do anything at the time, or at least I didn't. It was tricky because, for a number of reasons, for all of the reasons that everyone else on campus, faculty would have for it being tricky, which is that there is the the technology we probably haven't been using, at least in that amount, in that way.
Yeah.
And plus the added aspect of sound. What was, I think, probably most difficult in the spring was the fact that I had a big graduating class, and that graduating class all had individual graduation recitals, which all had to be canceled. We had no way of having even at that point, a videoed recital happening on campus. They have to have the facilities. They'd have to. This semester's a little bit different, but the spring it was impossible. And so what was tricky at that point was to also mitigate the upset or the disappointment, because a lot of the you have to kind of realize what the graduation recital is to these students. It's a culmination of 4 years of their work. It's a 1-hour solo recital. They've been preparing for the better part of a year for that particular recital, and it was canceled in some cases the day before the recital was scheduled, right? Wow. And that we were just approaching the music department's busiest recital period. It was starting on the 13th of March and going through to the end, the beginning of April. And so dealing with the students' disappointment was first on my mind, and they were great. They were great about it. They after the initial shock was over, they just went on with things. But to not have the venue to perform that they were expecting to have, the whole ritual of the recital was kind of taken from them. But the other thing that was impossible at that point, at least because I didn't have all of the knowledge of the technology that I do even now, was having successful lessons online, sound-wise. There's a specific function in Zoom that allows for us to have the original sound. And without that, your sound is horrible. None of us necessarily all knew that at that time. And original sound doesn't guarantee good sound, but it helps. It does help. And most of us and most of our students didn't have good mics, good headsets, good internet, and
that's a big one.
Yeah, it is a huge one, and even now they don't necessarily have that, and we can't ask that they have all of that. So that's very challenging. It continues to be very challenging, and one of the courses that has been the hardest for me to continue teaching, although I have, is the collaborative piano and guitar class, because there is also, in the idea of collaboration, the idea of working together in real time, there's also a latency issue online. And so sound lag between is so obvious that you cannot work together without having some sort of intermediary, like a recording program that you're working with between the individuals. And in that case, it's a collaboration of sorts, but it's not that kind of, I do something and it immediately affects the person, my partner, and my partner does something and that immediately affects me. You don't work that way. It's a different manner of collaboration, and that's been difficult, even with recording technology to deal with, because I still want to be able to teach them the concepts of real-time collaboration.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. The conversation has been very enriching because I've learned a lot from the professor of music, how you combine these things, because when you watch the performance, you are carried away that how do they do it? Are you planning to become a teaching fellow in the nearest future? What do you plan to do as your project? Or how involved are you in the instructional skill workshop on campus, working with the teaching center?
Well, to date, I haven't been very involved with the teaching center thus far. I've always been sort of admiring what's been going on, but absolutely, I've been thinking about applying to be a teaching fellow in the not too distant future. As far as projects are concerned, I would see one being in the area of collaboration, in maybe looking at how features of one-on-one teaching can be extracted to collaborative coaching and group teaching. In other words, taking the small model, rather than taking the classroom, a kind of classroom model, and adapting it for a small group, and rather taking the small group and an individual model and adapting it for the classroom. So
That's
that would be
good.
one of the areas I would be interested in pursuing. And one of the areas I am always pursuing is looking at the idea of physical gesture from a musical perspective, but also from a rhetorical perspective. And how do we use gesture in our daily lives and in our daily communication? And then how can we learn more from that, from our daily use of gesture, to inform our musical practice and vice versa?
That's beautiful. That would be a good place for us to round up our conversation. Right. Thank you very much, Deanna, for making our time out of your busy schedule to participate in these talks.
Thank you so much.
Look forward to more discussion.
This is
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.